So I'm Jgart. I've been involved with the Geeks project. I could tell you more or less, like if I were to, let's see, if we look at the earliest commit here, um, this thing, oh wow, quite a number of commits, but it was around 2020 or 21, if I'm not mistaken. Let me see. Yeah, so somewhere in 2021, I started what with some friends that started a project called Libre Miami. I introduced geeks into this organization in Miami called um, Libre Miami, and they were a geeks group. And at that time, I was just getting into geeks, and so I wanted to learn how to package software for geeks. I thought it was a very interesting project. The fact that it was so hackable, you could package software for in Scheme. Um, I had trouble like contributing in the past to Debian, and I just thought it was like a major rabbit hole. I'm like, oh, in Geeks, I could just write a scheme record and have my package done, and it's just like code, and it's not like all these files. So I got really excited about the project, and I wanted to do Geeks packaging meetups. So I started. I didn't start Libre Miami, but I joined Libre Miami. It already existed, and I started packaging meetups then around that time. And then at some point, I wanted to create a more geeks focused small group of hackers kind of working on different projects. And Where is Everyone kind of spun out of that. Um, the early co founders of that group were Do Not Shake, Raghav Gururajan was another person. And we've had other contributors who have joined since. Unwalks is another person who's joined Where is Everyone. And he's also done heavy development on toys, which maybe some of you have used, which is this nice search web ring that kind of started off as an idea, and Unwalks discovered this idea and completely just made this amazing, like developed out this amazing app. So I'm very thankful for him to kind of spearheading this application. It was a project that I originally made a few commits to, and he just really took it and made something really beautiful out of it. And then since I've contributed more, and other people have contributed uh, to this Guile service that uses the Geeks APIs. So Where is Everyone started that group, and essentially we're just like a collective of hackers that are associated with Geeks upstream, but we just want to have our own focus to maybe build web applications that have somewhat of Geeks focus. Um, so yeah, that's Where is Everyone. We don't really meet up regularly, mostly because I've just been too busy with work and other things. But at some point, we might have a random meetup or something. But since Geeks London's been doing such a great job of creating these social meetups, I'm not even bothering because I'll just come to the Geek social meetups. Um, and yeah, but we're mostly hacking. So if we have an IRC channel, and I'll just pull up our room there so you could see it, and we kind of just discuss stuff that we're working on. Um, to Out Where is Everyone, and here we chat about new projects that we're working on and things like that. But everything's very informal. So yeah, since then I've contributed to Geeks since through that time through Libre Miami. We also had another group at a moment that was called Geeks Together. But then Where is Everyone eventually came along, and also I just started hacking on Geeks myself. I have somewhere in the vicinity of like around 600 commits in Geeks. Some of them under various other usernames that I've committed under and things like that. But you could look up the stuff I've worked on since that time. And yeah, that's a little bit of history of my involvement with with Geeks. Yeah, so the plan for today is I'm going to introduce how I Mumi, how I use the Mumi tool. I'll talk a little bit. This is not going to cover everything of Mumi. Mumi's doing has a lot of features. It does quite a few things. For example, it has a GraphQL API. It's a web application. It's also a CLI tool for code review. This talk is going to talk about the CLI tool for code review and specifically how I use it for code review. I'm not sure if this is how it was intended, but this is how I've found in my own workflow that works for me. Um, so I'll introduce how I Mumi. We'll also review some upstream patches together that I've prepared at the end. And in that process, I'll show some of the features of the Mumi CLI. I'll also mention that part of my workflow, I use just your plain old web browser at times. Sometimes it's just nicer than the CLI. So I'll use the CLI where it makes sense, and then I'll use the web browser where that makes sense. And also I wanted to mention that I use RDE for my email setup. It just makes it so I don't have to think about email because I don't want to think about email. But I want a nice email setup in my Emacs. And I'm currently using RDE, by the way, here, and I'm on Fedora, by the way. So I use mostly RDE for its Geeks Home features and some of the other home services that I use on top of Fedora. That's how I'm currently using it. I've also used Geek System in the past, but it's a long rabbit hole story as to why I'm on Fedora right now, which I'm not going to go into. RDE makes email easy. And I'm going to just make a quick shout out to the RDE project because I really love it. Let's see if Emacs can open web links. Yes. And this is the page for the RDE project. They have a manual, and you could read about RDE here. Currently, there's been talks about how to automate some of the documentation. So this documentation is definitely a work in progress, and it's something that we would love contributions to help with that. So go talk to Andrew Tropin in their channel for RDE project to see how you can help out with the RDE project. And then, this is going to be a preface to doing patch review, which I'm just going to talk briefly about the features I'm using in RDE to just make the email workflow like really nice, because I use Mumi with Git send email and all that stuff. I'm configuring it with RDE, so just to be as comprehensive as possible and not to leave you in the dark with regards to like certain features that I'm using that then you're like, oh, how do I get my email set up? I just wanted to make sure you're aware of how I'm using that on Fedora on a foreign distro. So I use this feature Git, and this is a RDE feature. I have signing commits set to true because I want to sign my commits because I have commit access to Geeks, and all the commits have to be signed if you're going to push to the master branch. So that just sets it up so I don't have to think about signing my commits ever or accidentally not signing one. And then this is my signing key, and then this is just a feature that says, do you want Git send email to be enabled? And this will basically create a home service that will put the Git send email program in your profile, your home profile. And that's essentially all that does. So if you want to enable Git send email, you want to set that to true, which I do, because I want to be using Git send email. And if I click here, these are all links that point to Toys. And as you can see, Toys knows about the code in the RDE Geeks channel, which is where the RDE project lives. And as you can see here in Toys, we have the channel, we have the location of where that feature Git is at. And if we were to open that in Toys, it'll jump us to this source hut repo. And we can see here that we are at feature Git. And this is the source code for feature Git. And those are the keyword arguments that I enabled in my configuration for Geeks on Fedora. And you see, so here we have some code that just, if this is a truthy value, then we create a home service where we add the send email package. And that's what that keyword argument does. So RDE just automates a lot of stuff that makes your life really easy, and I love it. And it's another rabbit hole. but I highly recommend this rabbit hole. These are some of the other features. I'm not going to go into them, but these are all links. So if you download the source code, if you open the repository that I linked earlier, then you could see these are all links to the toys instance showing the documentation for these RDE features for email. And I enable all of these. And here's one foot gun that I just mentioned in the slides that make sure that you have feature user info enabled, because these features depend on the data that's provided in the RDE system that runs. There's kind of like a DAG, like a dependency tree of services and features that have to be enabled in order for these features to work. And so RDE will yell at you because it type checks that stuff in the scheme code directly in the body of the features. It'll do a check for these types and make sure that certain things are enabled based on which features you're using. So it has some pretty nice engineering going into it there. And then some of these features, I don't use them exactly as they're provided by the RDE project. I wrap them in another scheme function. So if you want to find out and go down that rabbit hole, I recommend my dot files for Geeks, which are here in this confetti repo. And it's also a Geeks channel, but it's also my dots. And so you could subscribe to my channel there as well. And there's a snippet for you to subscribe to that channel. If you're completely new to using email to do patch review, I know it's something very different from using something like GitHub or GitLab or Not a Bug, then I highly recommend to check this website put together by the Source Hut community. And they talk about how to first, how to install what you need in order to do patch review with email. And for any distro, here they even have Geeks, which is really great of them. They recommend to just install it this way, but I will recommend to just use RDE instead, because it's going to set up a ton of stuff for you that you're going to have to manually configure. If you have the time to do that, then all power to you, but I'd like to not think about it. Yeah, all this stuff is handled by RDEs, so I'm not going to go into that. That's not my recommendation. So yeah, this is like I mentioned earlier, this is a hot take on how I do patch review. This is my opinionated way to use Mumi to do patch review. It's probably not what other people do, but this is what I'm sharing with you. As far as the Mumi CLI, like how do you learn about Mumi? I would recommend to start, don't jump into the source code just yet. Just first come take a look at this page here, which says debugs user interface. I would maybe just ignore that. And really what we're interested in is in Mumi. Debugs is like an implementation detail. You only want to use it as much as you have to deal with Mumi. Mumi, a lot of the features that are in Mumi are there so that you can ignore debugs, because debugs is like pretty terrible. And it has a lot of really arcane, it has a lot of arcana that's just kind of like tribal knowledge and stuff that has been automated and codified into the Mumi CLI so that you don't have to think about it, and you'd rather not think about it. So here are some of the documentation that I think Aaron put together for talking about Mumi, but I'll let you read that later because I'm gonna give my hot take on it, on how I'm doing it. So here's some TL. So the first command I'm going to show, and I have an eat terminal here on the. Oh, let me see if. Let me just kill that, and let me open. Give me 1 second. So this is where my Geeks checkout is at.
And Jgart, sorry to interrupt you. It might be useful to increase the font size a little bit, if possible.
Yeah, like that.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you.
Okay.
And the other window as well.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. So there. Okay. So here, this is what I run when I'm going to hack on Geeks, and like this is all you really need that I use, at least that I know about, that I've used for a while. Yesterday I just looked for the first time, and there's actually a manifest in the root, which I've never used, but it's there. So you can do that instead. And as you can see, it has some other stuff that I don't use, but it has Mumi. I'm using an RDE feature that sets up the NSS certs. So that's not maybe as useful for me, but but we'll just use it. So I'm gonna use the manifest that's in the root directory of the Geeks repository. And by the way, the Geeks repository is at, well, I have a mirror of it here, but you could find it at this address at the HTTP URL. So now I'm inside of a Geek shell, so that means that Mumi is available. Just to reiterate, though, you can put Geeks as a development dependency, and then you could put Mumi in there, and that's another way to do it. But we're just going to use the manifest that's in there, which Geek shell will automatically pick up, and it tells us about it. And then if we do Mumi help, we get this help from the Mumi CLI. I'm not going to talk about these things down here. I don't use those things. Those are like related to the web server. This is going to be what I'm going to cover in the Mumi CLI and how I use it. So the first thing is the Mumi search. And then, so the Mumi search, you can do Mumi search, for example, we can do author, Jgart, and then I could search like for any random thing. Like, let's say I want to search for Python and see what pops up. And there's a lot of stuff for Python. What if I want to filter by only the things that are open? And here there's still a lot of stuff. And what if I want to just know the code that's been sent that's related to something matching Python from 2 days from now? So 2 days earlier. So here we have some recent stuff. So you could search that way. I prefer Firefox for this, but I'm just showing it here to be comprehensive, but I don't really use the Mumi search. What I do is I go to issues.geeks.gnu.org and I just search here through the search bar. And here are some hints. These are the same tags that work in the CLI for you. So that's Mumi search. That's all I'm going to say about it. I would encourage you to play around with the CLI and the web browser here. And same thing. So if I do Python, I could do is open, for example, and we could look for tickets that are open related to Python. And it's a similar interface, except you get a nice HTML. So we will move on to Mumi Compose. And Mumi Compose, again, this is where we're going back now to the arcana of debugs and the Debian control codes. Like Mumi Compose kind of exists to automate some of that stuff that you don't want to rabbit hole down into. So the -- close flag is a wrapper around some Debian control code, which I don't remember and I don't want to remember, which just closes a ticket. So instead of remembering that code from the Debian control codes, I just do Mumi compose -- close, and it will send an email. It would open Emacs and have me compose an email, and then it will put the Debian control code at the top and close that patch on the tracker. The same thing goes for the done flag. The done flag will mark the issue as done, and we could show an example of one that's been, let's see if we can say, so I think you could do a tag of done. Oh, I guess not. But if we do like, I'm sure if I just do Python, there's going to be some done tickets. Yeah. So there's this patch from 2024 that's marked as done. And if you were to use that done flag and send an email with that flag, it would automatically insert the Debian control code for that. We'll see that later when we do a little bit of the pairing that we'll get to. I'm going to use that to potentially close some tickets if we get around to that, or to just comment on them. So this will open, again, to reiterate, this will open your Emacs or whatever you have set as your editor. It uses XDG under the hood. XDG-open, if you know that binary executable, it'll use that to open whatever's set in your environment variable as your editor. And it'll open it up in the email in the correct format so that you could just type your email, and then it wants to use get send email to send that. So this is Mumi current. This prints the current ticket. I'll show that. So the last ticket I had was this one by Andy Tai, and this was from 26 hours ago, and there's the ticket number. So that prints the current ticket. You can also set the current ticket, so you can do Mumi current, and we're going to use the browser to go look for a patch here. So if I go over here, we will go to this one. Okay, so this ticket here, this person said, learning debugs, documentation unclear test. Anybody could email whatever they want to this. So this person said, help. This is embarrassing. I apologize for this report. I was following debugs to finally get started with learning the system. Unfortunately, the worst case scenario played out and I got exposed in the act. So this person, they should have waited until I gave this talk before sending this email, but I guess they didn't. But here we are. They're looking into some other documentation. And this is like the killer feature, I think, right here that interacts with Mumi, which is that this is how I personally use Mumi, which is how I think it should be intended to use it, which is you just copy paste this. And here I'm going to delete that stuff that I wrote out because I don't need to do that. I'm just going to copy pasta that. And now I've set the current ticket to this person, this ticket right here, 72872. You can see that. Oops, let me open that again. And in trying to open that, I'll show you the Mumi www command, which will open that in my browser. And now I'm back here. And as you can see, this informational down here in the footer will tell you how to set it. You could just copy paste that. If you want to apply this patch, this person doesn't have a patch that they've submitted. They've just sent a message here to ask for help. They're not aware of Geeks Help or something like that. So, but there's no patches, so this is not applicable here. But we can compose an email. So I'm going to try to do that. And I'm actually going to do that from my terminal, my GNOME terminal. So if I do Mumi current, okay, and I'm going to do close potentially. Let's see what we compose. Oh, okay, so Mumi, not that, sorry. It's Mumi compose close like that. So that opened my email with XDG. Sorry to hear that. I apologize for this report I was following. And then I'm going to tell them I recommend to use Mumi instead of debugs. Debugs is confusing. And then I'm just going to paste them to this page. And this is another nice feature of RDE, that RDE has another feature that lets you just automatically add this footer. So I have the footer set to like all the best, but let me just show you that real quick because I think that's so cool that how RDE does that. So this is my minimal, not so minimal anymore. And as you can see, I have this Jgart message signature. This is just a wrapper around the feature. Actually, this is just a function that I created that's in my confetti. I won't go into that. That's fed into another feature. But essentially here I'm just using a format function to basically say all the best. And this, I think I took it from Andrew's dot files, but this is really cool that you could just coordinate all that in the whole RDE system. So let me fix that. I recommend to use Mumi instead of debugs. Debugs is confusing. All the best. See these slides here for more info. And I'm just going to close this ticket. So I'm just going to do Control-C, and that sent it. So there's like some weird bug that complains about the GPG agent. I'm just ignoring that, but it did send. I just get spammed by that every time. Maybe Andrew knows about that. Andrew Droppin. So I just close my pane there, and let's see if Mumi takes a while for things to propagate. It might or might not be there already. Here, this is the documentation. Let's see if my email went through already. It might be like a few minutes before that email comes through. That's another thing to know about debugs, that it takes a while for your emails to get through, like minutes. So we'll move on to Mumi AM. And again, these are like you can read about this in the documentation, but the way I recommend to use Mumi AM, it's essentially a wrapper around Git AM. And I recommend to just copy paste stuff from the debugs, the web interface, instead of trying to use it directly. So for example, if we have this patch here called TechLive Digestif, which is the language server for the Tech Live system for typesetting, this person says that they fixed the build. So right now I'm showing you the workflow of how I use Mumi, by the way. So I'm gonna I gotta copy paste that Mumi current. Now I'm at TechLive Digestif. I'm just gonna copy this as well. I'm gonna assign that. And this applied the patch. So if we look at there, we see that the patch is applied. I'm just using TIG in my EAT terminal. By the way, I want to make a shout out to EAT, which is a pretty interesting terminal emulator in Emacs, written in Emacs Lisp, which is quite performant, surprisingly. So I definitely check out that project as well. Okay, so that's basically how I use Mumi AM. So the workflow again is I go to the page inside of the web browser. I copy this, paste it into my terminal in a shell, in a Geek shell, as I showed. And then I run Mumi AM, which wraps the Git AM and applies this particular patch from this web page using the Git AM tool. So it helps with facilitating all that. And then from here, we could then just, at that point, I'm just going to bring up my history. I'll remove this command. And if I do geeks build TechLive Digestif, I could then, I set it to compile some of the Guile object files away, but I should really just be using a watch exec in the background, but that's maybe an RDE feature come or something else that I do. But this will compile, and I'll try to then eventually compile TechLive Digestif. But so I'm going to move on from that. I would say sometimes you might get patches that don't apply, and there's some loose edges. So if you want to, you might run into those eventually, and if you want to contribute to fix those things, there's still some contribution left to contribute to this Mumi AM tool to avoid those. There's some edge cases, in other words, but most of the time, this tool works flawlessly. So just letting you know about that. This is the Mumi www command, which I showed earlier, to open the current issue in your web browser. This is the Mumi new. I'm not going to go into this one, but this is basically how you can just start a new issue. You're not going to get an existing issue, but you're going to start your own. And then from there, you start committing your changes, and then you could use some of the other tools to send the patches. Then there's also a Mumi send email, and this is a wrapper around get send email. And again, this is another piece of Arcana to deal with debug's Arcana, which is currently the Mumi tracker. When you send a patch for the first time, you can't. There's been like this known tribal knowledge about like that you can't send multiple patches all at once to the bug tracker for some reason that I'm not worrying about anymore because I'm using Mumi send email. And Mumi send email will basically just pull the debug, the Mumi instance and debugs to basically wait until it's able to send your entire patch series. Because otherwise you'll run into like foot guns is the TLDR on that. So if you don't use Mumi send email, what you should be doing first is you have to send an email first to the email address that it opens the patch, which again, I don't worry about that email address anymore because Mumi send email knows about that email address, but in the Geeks documentation, if you want to check out. And then once you send that initial email, you have to wait a few minutes until you get a reply email, and then you can finally send all of your patches. But with this command, it will just poll the server, and as soon as it's ready to send all the patches, it will send them. So it's a single command instead of like a multiple step process. So thanks to Aaron Isaac for implementing Mumi send email. And then here's a issue I found earlier that's just about like it's an open issue that Aaron Isaac opened, and it's about like Mumi CLI client features and review checklists. And there's some discussion here with Suhail, and hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly, and Ludovic, and they're talking about the Mumi CLI and checklist of future things that they want to be added. Like there's these things that aren't in Mumi yet. So if you have ideas for how you'd like to contribute to Mumi, you should join this conversation. And now that I've showed you how to use the tools, you can reply to this conversation pretty conveniently and easily and not be blocked by trying to configure your MSMTP and other rabbit hole settings of stuff. Okay, I'm going to move on beyond the future of Mumi. Another thing to know about if you're contributing to upstream, this is just another thing to be aware of. I asked this question on the mailing list in 2022, and I said, today Bondface mentioned to me that I should be cloning my packages and verifying the hashes with git hash object or git hash, if I remember correctly. And then, anyways, the point was that I wasn't verifying the hashes. And then Vagrant Cascadian jumped in and he said that that's a terrible idea because you're going to get pawned, essentially, if you're just building packages and not verifying the hashes. So it's something to be aware of, is that you don't want to be applying just like any random patches off of this mailing list, or just you want to cross check the hashes of the stuff to verify that it isn't like it is from a credible source. Because you could just have like some random person on the internet send like a buggy source repository that has a virus or has some sort of hacked Git repository that'll just pawn you. So I have some suggestions here, and I want to thank Unmatched Paren. He has this fish shell script that is on his repo that I've stolen in the past and used. And it basically, you give it as an argument the Git repo, and it will check out that repo and cd into it, and then run this geeks hash -rx. So it recursively hashes the repo. And this is one way to verify that that the hashes are correct, instead of just trusting whatever the stuff that's specified inside the Geeks package record itself. The long way to do that without a script is that you go to the project page, like GitHub or whatever, you download the tarball for the version that you're checking, you unpack that, you cd in there, you run that geeks hash -rx dot command, and then then you could check if you got pawned or not with if someone gave something that's not the valid thing that they're saying, or it's like hacked in some way, you could compare the hashes. So this is important, something to be aware of. Before pushing to master, if you have commit access, or if you want to know if your code is going to require, like, it's not as simple as just building the package itself, but if you update some package that depends on a ton of other packages, you want to make sure that your update to that package did not break all the other packages that depend on the package that you're updating. So there's a really handy command called guix refresh and -l. And if I run that, it will tell me if there's anything that depends on TechLive, djstif. If that's the case, then it's going to print those packages out. And then you could build all of those packages and make sure that they all build. If some of them fail, then you might want to fix those before sending the TechLive djstif patch that you want to send, because you've just broken some other packages. I will say that I've noticed that sometimes packages are broken anyway. So you could also might want to check if that package was just broken before you made your change. I'm not sure exactly how the Geeks community is dealing dealing with that. Um, there's some I've had some conversations um, with people about that, and maybe we should have merge trains, or just we shouldn't be pushing to master at all, but we should actually have like a staging branch that automatically gets merged into master if it fails. I mean, if it succeeds the CI merge train pipeline, because otherwise we're just depending on people's goodwill to have checked everything, and also on them having the resources to actually be able to build all of those dependents on their own machine. I have an old ThinkPad, and I can't build all of the dependents to Python Sphinx, for example. So here it says that these packages depend on this one. I happen to know that these TechLive packages are like kind of like meta packages where they include a ton of dependencies. So it's not that the TechLive scheme full package depends directly on djstif. I mean, it does in the sense that it's contained in it, but it's just there because it's a meta package and it includes a bunch of other packages together with it. The other thing you want to run, of course, is the Geeks linter tool when you're doing when you're contributing to Geeks, because that's like, you know, you want to make sure you're following the style guidelines of the Geeks project, but instead of reading a bunch of source code about, I mean, reading a bunch of documentation about how to follow those guidelines, you could just have this automated tool lint that for you, unless there's some tribal knowledge about how people like to do things, and then you're on your own for that, and you'll have to find out about that eventually. So I have here review some patches together. I'm trying to keep this presentation to about an hour. So I think I'm just going to try to do one on my own for you instead of making it such an interactive thing. Maybe if people are interested in the future, Geeks London would like to host some patch review sessions together where you can hack on a bunch of these together for like an extended period of time, maybe an hour or two would be quite nice. And you could then clean up the bug tracker and get stuff closed, get tickets closed. But for this one, I'm just gonna pick this scrap package. I have these other ones that I picked. There's just like kind of pick them somewhat randomly, but I'm gonna make sure that Scrot doesn't have a ton of things. Or maybe let's see if OpenShot, how many things are dependent on OpenShot. But I'm gonna click OpenShot. So anytime send this. Actually, I'm going to go with the seal colors update. That's going to be simpler. This is mostly just for demonstration purposes. So this is just a simple hash bump. So here I'll just show you one more time my code workflow. I mean my Geeks review patch workflow. So I go here, I go browsing around in my Firefox to this page, and someone GNU Geeks Live sends this patch 5 days ago. They updated SBCL CL colors to 061, and they bumped the hash on that. So then I'm gonna go here, and oh, interesting. Okay, so I'm going to set that to be the current ticket, and there you go. And then I'm gonna Mumi AM that with the sign flag, so it signs with. Oh, and this is that snippet I showed earlier of one of those patches that totally gets borked when I try to use Mumi. So there you go. That's an open ticket if you'd like to contribute to Mumi there. I'm going to not use that one. So we'll go to OpenShot. And actually, let's not go to OpenShot. Let's go to the scrap package. Oh no, OpenShot is good actually because it has just no dependence. So we'll go here. I'll click that. I'll set this to be the current one. Let me just clean up. Well, that's not necessary. So I'll do Mumi AM on that. And I've applied OpenShot. And I know I already ran Geeks refresh on this. So I know that there's no dependence on OpenShot. And then from here, I will we can delete this, and I'm gonna lint it. So I would lint it like that, OpenShot, and I lint this to make sure that they didn't change anything with regards something that makes the linter not pass. I passed the -n flag so it doesn't check like CVEs and other things because it makes like an internet request and it takes quite a while. But if you want to check for CVEs, that's one way to use. Geeks has an automated system for like making an API call to a CVE database to check for any open CVEs on this package. That could be another good thing to check though. And then what I would do from here is I would build this. I'm not going to do all of it just for sake of time, but I'll kill the linter there. And then what I would do next is I would build OpenShot, make sure it builds. So after I checked the stuff from the linter and I built it, then there I'm done, and the package is good. So at this point, because I'm using RDE, I know this is already, well, I also signed it, so I know it's signed, but if you wanted to double check that something was signed, you could use Geeks.git authenticate to check that all the commits are authenticated up to the latest commit in your branch before pushing. And then you would run Mumi compose --done. And I would run that. I'm not going to send this email because I would need to spend a little bit more time reviewing this, but I would say, hi, thanks for your contribution to GNU Geeks. And then I would just delete all this because I'm not commenting on their code. It all looks perfect. And then I would leave my all the best, and then I would just Control C that, and you could see that there's the Debian, another piece of tribal knowledge that Mumi just automates. It does a -done. It's next to the email address for the ticket. And there you could just Control C that, and it would close the ticket. After I closed that ticket and thanked them, then at that point, I would just git push to master. And that's the review process that I take as someone who has commit access, where I have to make sure that I've signed the commits, etc. Of course, then there's the other part of checking the hash. So you would want to go and check and make sure that, as from what I said before, that you want to check that, make sure that these aren't like pond updates that this person is sending, and you want to check the hash for the repo on that. So now this brings me to the end of my presentation. We're at 12:56, and I want to leave this open for questions. I want to just say that this is a venting safe space for you all to ask whatever you want and, you know, say whether you like this Mumi tool or you're happy with the Geeks patch review process currently, or you see ways that it could be improved. So yeah, thank you. So Ryan Pryor says that Bonface says, Munyoki says, I think that it uses XDG open to open an email link. Correct. Yeah. So whatever you set up as your default email client should be what it uses. Yeah. So if you're using like Thundercat, if I remember that name correctly, or something like that, it's going to open just whatever is set to your XDG. It might not be the editor variable now. I haven't looked into it, but maybe if you want to if you want to look into the Mumi source code, it's pretty easy to find. I'm not sure what environment variable Aaron set there for that. So I know there's a question I missed though of Steve. Can you bring me back to that question? I completely blew that question off.
I think it was Merad asking earlier if you could actually create a patch using Mumi itself. So you applied a patch, but what if you made a code change yourself? Would you be able to use Mumi to create a new patch?
Yeah. So let me quickly give you a little thought. So I am going to just open an Emacs. I'm going to go into like just some random file. Let's say I go here and I say like, hello world, and I put hello world. I say, hey, AppStream now needs hello world package inside of the native inputs. So I've added that. I add hello world. So then I commit that. And then when I'm done there, I can do here Mumi. I think it's Mumi new. Yeah, Mumi new. Let's look at the help to remind myself of that. So clear current issue, presumably to open a new one. Yeah. So you run Mumi new, and then you do Mumi send email -1. That's one way you could do it. There's other ways that you could do it, but this is one workflow you could do. And then from here, you can just do, from the send email, you would just do that. That will open up my Emacs. I would say, hi, I think hello world should be a native input. Please accept me. My contribution to GNU Geeks. Thank you. Yeah, and then I'd control CC that, and it would just send it and open up the new issue. So what Mumi is going to do behind the scenes, though, is that it's going to actually send an initial. This is, again, the debugs arcana that I don't care about, that I don't want to think about. So that's why I use Mumi. So here I would do Control C, Control C. Mumi send email is going to send the initial message that I just wrote in my patch. And then it's going to pull debugs over and over again for like a minute or so, something like that. And it's going to eventually get an okay to basically send the rest of your patches. So if you were to make 20 more commits or 5 more commits, 3 commits, 2 commits, it would then send all of those patches over once it gets the okay from the Mumi instance that it could proceed. Otherwise, you'd be really annoyed that your patch got sent all like borked because of some debugs arcana. Hopefully that all made sense. If not, it's okay. Just trust what I just said and use that workflow.
So there's another question much earlier from Charlie Mack. And he says, I'm curious if you have a mental or written checklist for when you first open a patch set. So you showed some of the things that you look at, like checking the styler. What other things do you think about when you're reviewing a patch?
Yeah, so let me go back to here and regarding checklist, no, I don't keep a checklist, but when the QA system is not in an unknown state, it will do that checklist for you. So if I click on QA, this talk is not about the Geeks QA system. I would recommend to contact Christopher Baines on that QA system. But this actually creates a checklist of the linter, and I've seen that working before. But it just know that QA, a lot of times you'll see it in this unknown state for a while, because it's like putting your branches like in a queue, and it takes quite a while to, like maybe a day or so, I've noticed on occasion, or maybe even longer, depending on what's in the queue, to basically build that. But I would love for like the merge train stuff to maybe be integrated with QA, so that we don't push directly to master. I don't know if that's the right way to go about it, but I would contact Christopher Baines to talk about that, because he's done a lot of work on QA, and that's probably another project that could, it would be great if more contributors would get involved with Christopher to help that project in wherever else it needs contributions. I know that Christopher is very busy, so with a bunch of projects. So but this is one place to check, and you see that this is yet to be processed, and it gives you a link to the revision. But eventually, if you were to commit linter sins, your linter sins will be here for everybody to see. And it'll even have the branch. So yeah, no need to, and here's a little checklist that you could mark patches as reviewed and this sort of stuff. But this is not Mumi. This is out of scope for Mumi. So I'm not going to speak to that. Are there any other questions that people have on anything else?
So Rick,
what's the best?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll get it. So what's the best way to help speed up the review process when not part of the team, not having commit privilege? That's a really great question. I would say fix the second part, not having commit privilege. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, I would say it would be good to get more people though to review. I think Geeks definitely needs like more reviewers to do patch review, because there's first of all, like nobody gets as far as I know, nobody's getting paid to review patches upstream. So there's a lot of people that are, you imagine they have like university jobs and all sorts of things, and other projects that are working on. So there's limited time for doing patch review. So I mean, I have a limited time as well. Like I could only review certain number of patches per month. So if your patches are very clean and small and take very little time for me to review, it's easy for me to push that through. If it's like a monster patch. So actually, one thing I could say to answer your question is, what's another way to help speed up the review process? This is something I learned just working in industry, and is when you working on a ticket and you're going to have your team review that ticket. One of the things that I've always been told when I've worked on a professional team in industry is, have smaller pull requests. So don't send a pull request with like 20, 30 patches and expect that to get reviewed immediately. So I don't think we have the resources to review something that's like 30 patches long or 20 patches long, even 50 patches long, unless that person has a number of hours to just devote to that single patch, because that's how long it could potentially take. I think a place where you can get really speedy reviews is in updating packages, like making packages that need to be updated. There's a lot of out of date Python packages, for example, um, that could get updated. So before adding a new package is great when we get new packages into Geeks, but really there's a lot of work to be done on just updating packages. That's one place that could help out a lot. And those things get reviewed quickly, or they can, and that could help out with those things. But other things that require a bigger time investment, and it depends on whether people have that time in their week, if they're working a full-time job. This is all volunteer. So if you yourself want to eventually get commit access, I encourage people to get commit access that are really feel like they're devoted to reviewing patches. I try to review as many patches as I can, given my bandwidth, in a given week, or a month. Sometimes I might not be able to review for 2 weeks. It depends on how busy I am. But if you have a lot of time to review code, I highly recommend to get, I think it's 50 patches into Geeks. Maybe start by updating tiny packages that are easy to review, get your commits up, and apply for commit access. And I'd be happy to vouch for you if I'm familiar with the work you've done, because we could use more help on that front. So
while you're on this topic, so I put a link in to the wiki page that we put together on how to do patch reviews for this year. So the original intention of this meetup was that we would do some patch reviews, and that has a sort of a bunch of steps in there. It's not using Mumi, but it's a similar sort of situation. But more importantly, it has some reports that you can run, which I have just been pre-created, which will show the status of patches and some kind of social conventions on how you can review a patch, how to deal with it and what to send. So if you're interested in doing that, I've had some really good success with just reviewing small patches that have maybe been a bit stuck, revving it as a new version, so not changing the source code, just rechecking that it builds, and then updating to say, hey, I reviewed this, all the synopses are correct, the language is correct, it's a correct format, it gets through the checkers correctly, and that I think really helps somebody like Jgart as a committer, who then knows the patch is in good shape and somebody else has actually had a look at it, not just the original creator. Because we all know if we're creating a patch at 3 a.m, we might not necessarily be reading the synopsis with great detail, or perhaps we get the formatting slightly wrong. So having another pair of eyes just review a patch, and it's great experience, a great way to get experience across the whole of the distribution as well.
Yeah. So as a non-committer, as Steve was saying, helping out the person reviewing to make their job easier, I would say this is great. Probably, I know Steve, I'm familiar with Steve, so then I have a little bit more trust. But nonetheless, of course, I have to check everything that he's presented. If it's someone I've never met, I'll I have to even have more caution. But at the end of the day, you need to check everything. So it's whoever has commit access has to do the whole review themselves, and that takes time. So another place where, it's just automation. If we could find other ways to automate updates, I think the Nix project has certain ways that they update packages that still might be Geeks friendly to the project's goals. Maybe there's some things there that we could consider automating to just make the process better, for doing little minor updates here and there where we could just approve things, but just set them on autopilot for set the build process and the getting the branch ready as on autopilot, and then you review all that code and make sure it's good. The hash thing is another thing, the thing I mentioned earlier. If someone could write a script, maybe a guile script or some other type of script where it just makes checking those hashes easier or more integrated, that could be trusted, that would improve the speed at which I can review patches, because I don't have to go through the manual process or use unmatched parens fish script to do it. that could be helpful. Yeah, but if you want to make patch review go faster, one of the best ways is, of course, to get yourself to be a committer. So building trust in the Geeks community to eventually become a committer is a great way, but then there's a responsibility that you put in some time to review that. And, life happens and you can't always put in that time. So that complicates things. But if we just have more people doing it, then we'll just get a lot more help with regards to patch review. This is not just like a problem to the Geeks project. This is a problem to like companies. Everybody has trouble with patch review. It's a time problem. It's a problem of just having enough time to sit down and review other people's code and make sure it's not broken or hacked, and then pushing it. That takes time and human, labor.
And Jgart, I think Charlie Mack asked what happens when a committer breaks QA.
Yeah, so what happens when a committer breaks QA? So hopefully they broke QA and not Geeks. If they broke QA, then by break QA, you mean that like something like broke the QA web application that Christopher Baines created itself, or something breaks in the QA queue of things that it's building. If something's broken there, then it sounds like QA is doing its job. Maybe I'm not understanding. Oh, merge about. Okay, so what happens if someone breaks Geeks itself and merges a bad commit to main? So that's happened before. I don't know if anybody's noticed when those things happen, but you have to add a revert commit and either fix the problem or revert the commit that broke it. It's just like any other project that's Geeks or not. If there's a bad commit, you got to fix it or you got to revert the commit. That's where I think we should open a discussion eventually about having some sort of merge train policy. Of course, this would require a ton of work to build that infrastructure into the Geeks project, and maybe nobody has time to do that. So we'll have to stick to the manual process of making sure that we are sure before we push to master, which is not the most ideal situation. So I think we should use some sort of merge train approach. So another question, I'm trying to update some Python packages I use, but all of them are stuck. Okay, all of them are stuck due to the old libusb and Geeks. So I've submitted a patch, but it's not committed due to having to rebuild too many packages. What's the workflow for updating such a complicated package which requires a lot of rebuilds? So I know that there's team branches where they request to merge. In the case of a package like libusb, I haven't run geeks refresh-l on it, so I don't remember how many. I imagine it rebuilds like tons of things. Like maybe is it over 500 packages or something? If it's something like that, you probably want to. Oh, thousands. Okay, so if it's over like 1,000, someone correct me if I'm wrong, but should you do like a request to merge? I think that's how people do that. You basically push it. Okay, core updates. There you go. So you push the core updates, and then you request to merge core updates, and then you have to wait until someone could review the QA and make sure that the libusb on the core updates branch is building, and everything that depends, or is it everything that's dependent on that is building successfully. And then finally someone could manually look at that core updates branch and then finally merge it into master. Ideally that process would be automated, and I know it's currently not. So if anybody wants to contribute on that front, it's a huge project, but maybe someone has the time and skills to do that, to build such a infrastructure into Geeks. That would speed up code review also by a ton. Because I know that in the past, I remember at Geeks FOSDEM, the year that I went, there was a lot of talk about core updates being very way out of date and not having been merged for Like I think it was like close to a year. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it was like around the year that they hadn't update core updates, and I think the main reason was mostly just due to lack of time. So if we were to just automate that, we would be able to not have to spend so many human hours to do that. So Lussick says, I don't really understand, why can't we have a couple of versions of the same package in that case until core updates is merged, just to have needed packages right now? Yeah, that's just do it. You know, submit, give your reason and give the patch, and then have someone review it. Is someone correct me if there's a reason why we don't do that, or if we just do that but nobody proposes it. At the end of the day,
I know of a recent reason why. I think Chris is not on the call. Anyway, core updates has had this issue where not different packages, but the same update, the same commit has been applied to core updates, and it's been applied to a team branch, and that team branch has gone into master, and it's made it significantly more complicated to then have to try and cherry pick through thousands and thousands of commits in core updates to land up with a clean branch on master. So I think the current proposed direction of travel is towards core updates being much more shortly lived. So, you know, if it was every 6 months, if it was every 3 months, then we wouldn't get this thing where core, you know, core commits were so far behind that we then had to, you know, rebuild kind of a Python next or a you know, whatever package next. So I think that's the current direction of travel. But like everything, the main constraint, as you point out, Jgart, is people's time, not so much the technical solution, it's the time to implement and maintain whichever solution is selected. And so I think what's happened with core updates is an example of where we currently have team branches for most things, but with core updates, it kind of grew out of control. And then we have struggled to get it recommitted. Although I think guix.social is currently discussing that core updates may be merged very soon. And, you know, fingers crossed, maybe this will be the last time that we have an 18 months core updates branch.
Yeah. So on this topic, I have two things regarding what Lussick said. So I'll start with the well, yeah. So regarding the first concern from Lussick, which is on core updates. Yeah, like I think long-lived branches in general is an anti-pattern. Like I don't think we should have branches that have been sitting around for a year. That's a huge headache, given the fact that we have so little people available to give so much time to patch review. It's gonna make it like a day's event, a multiple days event, just to be able to get through an old branch that's like a year old. It's a nightmare. It's a total nightmare. So I think we should have like some sort of like short term, like branches should never, either we should go by branches. I've had this idea of we should go by packages. So we should like kind of tag packages that require a huge amount of updates, and then just make a branch specifically for libusb. So instead of putting libusb inside of the core updates branch, let's just say we're going to have the libusb update date, and then there's some people that will take care of that, and we'll just update libusb and review that small little branch that updates libusb. But that would require a lot of organization, a lot of coordination amongst people, and you know, the time to do it in the end. It's easier just to have a code dump into core updates and then just wait a year, but then you have a huge problem on your hands. Regarding Python and Python Next, I've heard in the past, I don't know where this is documented except for like in some random thread on guix.social mailing list, but the reason we don't have like a Python Next is because of, again, the maintenance burden. It's easier to develop and make sure that all the Python packages are building successfully. Like the CI is green, the QA is green for every single Python package that depends on the current Python version. For example, if it's 3.12, then everything builds successfully. If we have Python Next, then we have to make sure that everything that depends on the Python Next version is also building successfully. So you have to get thousands of packages, because there's thousands of Python packages in Guix. We have to get all of those thousands of Python packages to be completely green for Python and Python Next. And that increases the maintenance burden. So unless we get automation in that front, it's going to be hard to support 2 different Python versions like that. You know, with so many Python packages that we have thousands of Python packages, and you do an upgrade like that, then you have to make sure they're building across. So sorry, I'm like repeating myself, but so Merod says, so would it be helpful or even rational if there is an automation that hash bumps, and if something failed building, it raises a flag for manual intervention? Yeah, this I nodded at this earlier, that the Nix project has automated stuff like that. I know people have concerns about that sort of automation. Like, we don't want to be just like having updates going into master on autopilot without any human reviewing it for security reasons. That's as much as I know. That's like the major TLDR that I've gotten from just hanging out in the Geeks community. Yeah, it's something to be talked about. The thing is getting the people together that can make it happen and making it happen and finding the time to make it happen. So that, yeah, those are the blockers. That's the blocker. Hopefully that answers your question there. So Indeterminacy says, I've wondered about splitting language definitions to have one definition file for forming a language, and then one definition file for tools which depend on said language. To Indeterminacy, I'm just gonna say moo, like cow moo. And please, it's an inside joke, I'm sorry, but just email me later, because that's a huge rabbit hole right there, and I'd be happy to have the conversation with you over a cup of tea on a Jitsi chat or something. So please contact me and we'll set that up. So Rick says, thanks. So the way to go for me on libUSB is just wait for the next core updates merge until starting on libUSB again. Yeah, Rick, that's one thing. I would say another thing you could potentially do is start a revolution and just put a branch for libUSB and say, hey, I want to merge just libUSB and all the things that depend on it, and this single branch I wanted to get focused on, instead of core updates with libUSB and like a ton of other packages that require thousands of builds. That's one approach. People might have thoughts about why they won't like that approach, and I'd be curious to discuss it, but we could have a conversation around that to see why that's not an approach when you have limited review forces available. Can Geeks run test suites of packages? So we have in the build system itself, it runs checks on the packages. Like, for example, the Python build system runs PyTest when you, not all Python packages have PyTest, but the way we like PyTest enabled, some packages just don't run the tests, or they don't have a test suite. But one of the ways that tests are run on packages is that you build the Geeks package itself, and then like PyTest will run on that package, and you'll have to trust that the upstream maintainer of that Python package wrote a good amount of test coverage for that library, and you trust it. Yeah, and I completely agree with Dale. You know, this be the change you want to see in the world. Aaron has also sent me a logo once, I remember, on a chat with like a Nike symbol, saying that this is a duocracy, in the sense of like, just do it. You know, you have to, if you want to see anything get done, you have to do it yourself. Or if you want to do it with other people in a community, like the Geeks London community, then you got to get a bunch of the Geeks London people together to work on this stuff and try to push and try to make the change that you want to see in the world together. Yeah, patch the world. Yeah, so I welcome you to go on ahead and patch the world and go forth and contribute and hack on free software. So user says adding a single Rust package into Guix can be a lot of work. Guix import provides some automation, but it's not fully automated. Is that by design? Why not build a derivation on the fly? Similar to what Andrew Tropping showed in one of his videos. I haven't seen that video. So is there a video with Andrew Troppin building Rust packages on the fly? I would love to see that. So if you could link us to that. I know that Andrew Troppin produces a lot of content, and I'm not able to watch all the videos. So, but I would love to see that video. But yeah,
it is by design, isn't it, Jgart? Like, I think everybody who comes into the Geeks community says, well, what we should do is we should automate patch. We should automate patch creation, automatically apply, CI them, and then release them, right? But I think in general, the Geeks community, and I'll say I'm one of the people that has turned up to a Geeks event saying that. And then in general, the Geeks community's sort of pushback is that its desire is for high quality packages. So there's a kind of human element to that review process that can't be, the general sense is that can't be removed or is unlikely to be removed. I'm not exactly sure exactly what verb to use there, but I would say in general, there's been a sort of gentle pushback saying, well, humans need to be involved in the process. And so kind of going faster through automation is a thing, but there will always be a human step.
Yeah, that's a project issue. Like if you want really high quality packages, but then you're extremely ambitious about like having a monster package collection. Those two things are going to grind up against each other and cause a lot of dissonance. So it would be a lot easier to maintain less packages, but of course people see the Geeks project, they get very excited and they want to package the entire universe. And that's I'm not saying it's scope creep, but I'm just saying it's a lot of work, and it might not be realistic on the amount of stuff you want to do. I know that the Rust packaging situation is an unsolved issue. Like there's people that were working on an antioxidant build system for Rust. I think it was Maxime, was it? Correct me if I'm wrong, but Rust is like an unanswered research question from what I've picked up from the tribal knowledge that I've collected. So if anybody has any updates on the Rust situation and Geeks, I know that you can't use Geeks to be a Rust developer on. Like you can't just like cargo add your dependencies with Geeks and have all that work. Geeks just doesn't support that. So what the de facto that everybody just knows about is that you could package Rust stuff if you're willing to put in the time and do all the manual work, because a lot of it requires a lot of manual steps, and you could eventually get a Rust program into Geeks. But I haven't heard of people using Geeks for development from a developer perspective, like to make a Rust project. They just end up not using Geeks and using Cargo itself, or Nix has some solutions that are like third-party solutions for, and I think in-house solutions for how they deal with Rust, but it wouldn't be in line with the goals of the Geeks project. So that's like an open question and an open research project. So if you're really motivated to work on that and go down that rabbit hole, just do it. The world is your oyster. It's not an area that I'm necessarily focusing on myself, but maybe someone else is, and you should get in contact with them.
I think Leszek has a question.
Someone raised their hand.
Yeah, he raised his hand. They raised their hand.
Leszek, would you like to state your question or over the voice thing? Or if not, you could put it in the chat however you like. Or let me know if I missed it. Oh, okay. Also, while I'm here with a lot of Geeks hackers, I think I should ask, what do we do when we have dependency cycles? For example, I was trying to update CMake package, and since 3.27, it depends on CPP DAP, which requires CMake to build. I would have to look at your package in more detail. Sounds like a rabbit hole, but I would ask on Geeks Devel. That's one place where you could start finding out about that, but without like a patch and like having your package open in my editor and having like a good amount of time to work on it, it's hard for me to help you there. But feel free to email your patch to the Geeks Devel list or put it in a branch and share it with people on the Matrix Geeks channel or some other platform or community where Geeks is being discussed. Yeah, I see Aaron has some thoughts on that. Okay, I'm going to save this video so I could check out that Andrew Tropin video later. Thanks, Sergio. I don't think the CI success should lead to automated merge. I believe it is an easy thing to tell the maintainer this is the new hash and it builds exactly this way. It would be easier to bump versions. Yeah, I gave a real TLDR on what the merge train is about. I also don't agree it should be like completely automated. So, but I think it would be hard. We spend a lot of time here discussing it. So if people in the future are interested in talking about merge trains and the details of that automation stuff, we should organize a meeting around that, and that would be something cool to do. It would be another rabbit hole that has, yeah. Anyways, yeah. Does anybody have any last question? If not, we could end it there. We had a good round of questions from the community. There seems like a lot of people have a lot of very ambitious things they want to do in Geeks, and I'm hoping they find the time to be able to complete those things and work on those things. It's hard work, and if you want to do it and you have the time, go forth and hack away. Happy hacking.
Jgart, thank you very much for giving that talk today. That was fantastic. I have learned new things about Mumi. That was brilliant, and I'll look forward to deep diving on the commit train at some point in the future.
Great. Thank you for having me, and I appreciate it. So thank you for hosting this. Fabio, Steven, and Aaron, thank you very much.
All right, everybody. Have a great rest of the evening. Bye.
See ya. Bye.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks, Jgart. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.